Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, it has been a pretty full debate today, and so I do not intend on being too long. And there's been full contribution on both sides, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I heard the comments made by the member for St. Barnabas, which reminded me that both my daughters this year graduated. My youngest daughter, Janae, graduated from the 6th grade Sunland Baptist Academy. She was the first, or not the first, but the highest female in her class when she graduated. So I wanted to publicly say how proud we are of Janae. Also, Mr. Deputy, we were pleased to have our second daughter, Jaylise, who graduated from high school this year. She graduated again with first class honors, and we were very pleased to, and we want to say publicly how pleased we are of her graduating. She graduated as the deputy head girl, and she does intend to go off to school this year studying mechanical engineering. So we are very pleased with her as well. And then while I'm on my feet, I might as well just say how pleased we are with our eldest daughter, Janae, our eldest daughter, Jaden, who will be, God willing, graduating from law school this coming December. So we are very pleased with her as well. Mr. Deputy, also I wanted to say for and on behalf of the Smiths Point residents that, and I know that the Minister of Works is aware of this with respect to their seawall. They have shown us some very troubling photographs of some issues that they are having with that seawall. And so we want to just remind the member for Central and South Eleuthera that the Ministry of Works, we require them to take a look at that, and which we expect should be an easy fix, but it would be the seawall, the Smiths Point seawall. No, I don't think you all had looked at the, right, I don't think you all had looked at the Smiths Point seawall. I think it was the High Rock seawall that's what you all looked at. But residents have also raised the issue with the repair of the seawall in Smiths Point. Mr. Deputy, the civil aviation bills are very technical bills, but they are non-controversial bills. And the civil aviation is one of those areas that we ought to, both sides, we ought to work together to ensure the proper safety standards are met and that those proper safety standards are in place. And so this is just another example of, I believe, those of us on this side supporting the necessary amendments that are required. And what I believe all of the members on that side have indicated, as well as I believe some on this side, that these amendments are necessary to ensure that we continue to keep that Tier 1 rating with respect to our airports. And it would be disastrous, obviously, for us if we did not keep that rating. And so this was, again, a process that those of us on this side who were fortunate to be able to serve in the cabinet had to also go through, which was after an assessment was done. The assessment had indicated that there were these issues that the airport had required, and we had to act on those changes that were needed. And again, it was those changes that were needed very quickly, and they were needed to ensure that we continue to keep that Tier 1 rating. And so the government at that time did what was necessary to ensure that we upgraded the airport and that we upgraded the civil aviation industry to make sure that we kept that Tier 1 rating. Mr. Deputy, I do also want to sincerely thank the member for Exuma and Ragged Island, where he offered for us to be briefed on the bills. And he offered, I believe it was one of the lawyers from Civil Aviation, who did a very good job. He did a tremendous job of going through the bills for us, explaining the background, also indicating what was necessary, what was required, how the bill speaks to what and changes what was requested. And so I do want to thank him for that. It is a practice that I believe should be adopted for all of the pieces of legislation that are brought to Parliament. In my view, if everyone understands the significance of the legislation and it elevates the debate, so that when you are debating, it is foreseeable that when you debate, you are debating the issues rather than non-issues. And so I would make the request that in the same way that the member for Exuma offered briefing from a lawyer who knew about the bills, this could also be from a lawyer from the Attorney General's office who also may have been involved in drafting the bills, and also from the law reform. You know, we are speaking about the law reform bill is also a part of these bills that are being passed today. And so it is a request that I would make on behalf of those of us on this side that for all of the bills that are coming, that we can organize to have a attorney from either the Attorney General's office, the law reform, who can give a briefing on those details of the bills. I think, again, it would be a useful process for all of us, particularly those on the opposition side, to have a clearer understanding of the government's position and the government's reasoning from the technical persons. And any questions that we may have, we can ask them of the technical persons, and the technical persons can give their responses, give their technical answers, because that's precisely what happened. There were questions that were raised, and the attorney was able to adequately answer those questions. So if you were able to answer those questions, then there's no need for you to ask those questions on the floor. And so that's something that I would request. I know that we have coming up the cannabis bill, and again, it would be useful if the government would allow for someone from the Attorney General's office or from someone from the Ministry of Health to be prepared to go through that, a technical person and someone who is knowledgeable of the bills or who helped to draft the bill to be able to speak to the members of the opposition, to be able to brief us on those technical bills. It was, and I will say this, that it may not have been done when we were in government, But it is a useful step forward. It is something that I think both sides would benefit from if the technical persons were able to speak to those of us on this side, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, again, in principle, we have no difficulties. In fact, we agree that the Director General and the technical team should have full autonomy required, particularly when it comes to safety standards that are required. Also, in principle, I see no objection again to this, having had the privilege to sit in cabinet, make those kinds of decisions, and in most cases, decisions that are made from ministers and good ministers are taken after you have gotten the adequate advice from the technical staff and from the technical team. So again, it would make sense that particularly in an area like civil aviation, that we leave those technical issues and technical matters to the technical team and let the ministers and the board focus on the advancing the policy issues that we have the ability to be able to speak to. I know that both will continue to work together, but I think it is a useful classification to make sure that you have those two different issues. And also, Mr. Deputy, you know, it's almost a part of the Bahamian culture that, you know, in the Bahamas, once you are elected to Parliament, and once you become if you are elected to Parliament and appointed minister, you are automatically expected to know everything about everything in your ministry. And the reality is that's not the case, and we must rely on the advice that we are given from the technical staff. And in most cases, the technical staff are the same people who advised the previous government. In most cases, they are also the same people who are advising the other side as well. Also, I want to thank the member for Michael, because the member for Michael, I thought, gave a very good history of the achievements of the civil aviation, and gave a very non-political history, because he spoke of what took place under a PLP administration, and he also spoke to what took place under an FNM administration. He spoke to what took place in 2011. He spoke to what took place in 2018, in 2020. And those were, again, significant achievements, and those achievements were made under a free national movement government. So I want to thank him again for giving the full picture of what had taken place in civil aviation. Just before I take my seat, Mr. Deputy, there were a number of issues I suspect that were raised, and I just wanted to make some comment on those issues that were raised. The member for Exuma, I believe, raised the issue of Bahamas Air. And, you know, there's been a long, I guess, standing debate in terms of what Bahamas Air ought to be, and what Bahamas Air needs to be, and what direction they should be going. For my part, I agree with the member for Exuma. I believe that, you know, it is one of those things where I don't know if we will ever have a Bahamas Air that the central government does not subsidize. There may be a question as to the level of this subsidy, and we can argue about what that amount of the subsidy will be. But I believe that there will always be room there for the central government to be able to subsidize Bahamas Air, because again, Bahamas Air is one of those entities that is an airline, but it is also a national service to the country. And so when you look at things like repatriation, that's a national service. When you look at what was done yesterday in traveling to Jamaica to remove students, to remove Bahamians, again, that's a national service. When it comes to evacuating persons from hurricanes, that's a national service. And those kinds of decisions have to be made where you are able to move Bahamas airplanes to accommodate national interests. And so, we can talk about making Bahamas Air more efficient. We can talk about making it independent more without having all of the political influence. But at the end of the day, Bahamas Air has to continue to remain a national interest and has to continue to achieve those national interests for the country. Again, Mr. Deputy, one of the issues, again, that was raised by some of the technicians was that, and this is something that I witnessed, all of the bills, the civil aviation bills that come, they appear to be where there is a threat of, if you do not do this, you are in danger of losing your Tier 1 status. And in doing that, you almost are negotiating with a gun to your head. I mean, that's the reality of either government. It doesn't matter. But when you are in that seat and the FAA or the international regulators say to you, this is what we require. If you do not do this, then you are in danger of losing your Tier 1 status, and we do not want that to happen. My question is, how can we work to, instead of these things being where you have to do this and there is a time frame that is put on you to do this, is there a way for you to have almost a permanent on-staff, what I would call consultant, who may be continuously communicating with these agencies, and instead of waiting for an assessment to be done, that there is an ongoing assessment, that assessment almost never ends, that there is a continuous assessment being done so that you are continually upgrading what is required. Because we know in this industry, it is a dynamic industry. It changes. What was accepted one year may not be accepted in another year. But it has to be a way where we can continue the upgrade process in a way where if an assessment is being done next year, we almost already know what those requirements would be or what those standards are, so that we can even put those things in place even before the assessment is done. So that once that assessment is done, that there shouldn't be any need for us to upgrade, because we have been upgrading over the years. We were upgrading to ensure that we kept up to date with those standards. There must be a way for us to do it without waiting for that assessment to be done and then having to act quickly if that, with those things for the assessment to be done. Mr. Deputy, also the member for Exuma spoke about the overflight fees. And in his description of what the status was, that sort of raised, I guess, some questions that I believe myself and I believe some members of the public, I suspect, would also have, which is, if I understood him correctly, that while there was an agreement for the airlines to pay a specific amount, the airlines had an issue with it, and that amount was being held, I suppose, in trust or held until this dispute would have been resolved, and that the government made an offer which is now going through the process of consultation. And with respect to that offer, what is the difference of what was agreed and what the government offered? And whether what the government offered covers, or how does that cover the cost with the aviation industry? Because obviously the in-flight fees or the overflight fees, the purpose of those overflight fees was to upgrade the industry. Now, we can have a fight any day with the airlines. We can have issues with the airlines any day. But the purpose of that would have been to upgrade the Bahamian civil aviation industry. And so we understand this is what was agreed. We understand that there's a dispute. And if I understand the member for Exuma correctly, there was an offer which is different from what is agreed. You may, as well as you may not be able to disclose what that is, but we'd like to understand what the difference is between what was agreed and what that amount was which was offered, and how likely is it that what was offered would be accepted. What are the consultations telling you as to whether this is something that may, as well as it may not be accepted? I think that's one of the questions that I had, one of the questions I believe that members of the public would also have with respect to those overflight fees. There's also, Mr. Deputy, an issue that was raised. I believe it was a customs flyer that came out with respect to landing on landing fees, or an increase in landing fees for private commercial private commercial flights, as well as private flights for cargo flights and private recreational flights. I had a meeting with the couple of members from the Bahamas Pilots Association, particularly those in Freeport, because I guess this affects those in Freeport a little bit more than it affects those in Nassau. That's what I was advised, but particularly those in Freeport. And their issue was they would like some clarification. They would like, first of all, I guess, to have a meeting with those persons who put in place the fees, or the increase in fees. And we would hope that this does not go down the same road that the issue with the boaters went down. And again, they say that there was no consultation. No one had spoken to them prior to the increase in those fees. And in some cases, the fees would be increased from $50 to $300. And there is a question whether, because there's one fee for if you have a private plane that has 4 or less seats, and then if you have a private plane that has 4 or more seats. They would like to understand how that was arrived at, or why that difference would, why that difference is significant. They also would like to understand there's also a separate fee if you are taking a flight, a recreation flight. Now, what was explained to me was that most private planes they own those planes. So if you are taking your family, or if you're taking your, even if it's your business partner, or you taking those persons to the U.S., they would like to understand, if it is my plane, is it recreation, or does it apply to those who have the 4 seats or the 6 seats? So they would like to understand that difference. They said that it may be confusing to them in terms of what applies. So we'd like you to have a conversation with them so that they can be fully briefed as to what happened, that you can hear their complaint, because they obviously have a complaint in terms of the increase in those increase in those fees. One person said to me that it may be a difference of where they used to fly once or twice a week to now it may be where they may only be flying once a month. And so they would like to, again, understand what the rationale behind that was. And then, Mr. Deputy, the issue again was raised with respect to the Grand Bahama Airport. And I want to attempt to address this sort of in a non-contentious, non-political way. And to ask this question. What is happening with respect to the airport deal? I know that there may be some things that you cannot say if you are still having negotiations and so on with respect to this deal. But from the public standpoint, the public, I believe, needs to understand what is happening with this deal. At one point, the members of the government were able to give timelines to say that they anticipated that the airport construction would start at this particular time. If the airport construction started at this time, then the completion would be at this time. I noticed that you've sort of stopped from giving those kinds of timelines. And again, I understand why, well, I understand why one would stop from giving. I don't understand why you did, but I understand why one could possibly stop from giving those. And so, as best as you can, if you can articulate what the situation is with respect to the airport, can you give a timeline as to when you anticipate the airport commencing construction? And once the construction commences, what that timeline would be for completion? Can you also give an idea as to what the financial arrangements would be for the Manchester Group? What is the situation going to be in terms of the PPP, so that, again, we can understand what the financial implications would be. One of the examples of why this question is so relevant is the issue that was raised with South Bimini, where you have a PPP, again, a non-governmental person who is now responsible for that airport, and now those fees have increased, and the folks in Bimini are having an issue with those fees being increased. And so we would again want to understand what is the situation with respect to Grand Bahamas Airport, and if those kinds of fees would, are we able to anticipate that those are the kind of fees that Freeport is going to have? And I would caution that when you look at these kinds of fees, use Nassau on the Providence as a guideline that family islands should not be more than Nassau, because in a lot of cases, family islands are competing with Nassau in terms of having their visitors. So if it costs more to go to the family islands than it is to go to Nassau, and it is something that can be controlled in terms of the passenger taxes or the passenger fees, what we should do is seek to make sure that those passenger fees are not more than Nassau. And so I would ask the government to take a second look at the South Bimini issue, because from what it appears, that cost is more to go to Bimini than it is to go to Nassau. And we would hope that that type of situation does not happen when you are looking at Grand Bahama. And so those would be the points that I would raise on this side, Mr. Deputy. We on this side, as we say, when it comes to these technical bills, we are happy to cooperate with the government to ensure that we support these bills, to ensure that the Bahamas keeps their Tier 1 status. It is in all of our interests that the Bahamas keeps this Tier 1 status. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy.